Okay, so today we're going to look at some issues with the Pester extension for Azure DevOps or Azure pipelines or whatever you want to call it these days. So someone logged an issue saying it can't compare different version numbers because this is a pre-release version number and semantic versioning doesn't really work with system.version. So the solution is just to not look for pre-release versions, which we shouldn't be doing anyway, but apparently sometimes we do, or it might be a case of something like PS default parameter names are default parameters are set to pick up pre-release versions for some reason. So we've got a reasonably quick fix for this, but we'll just have a quick walk through what the extension does and then go from there. So this is the main script for the extension. We've got a whole bunch of them in our repository. This is the Pester one. So we've got a nice big bunch of parameters for things like which folder do you want to target, where do you want the results to go. Doesn't need to run as 32-bit, which some things do. Hopefully not too much these days. Any additional modules that, any paths that you want to point for modules, if you need to test specific things like the build version and you've downloaded a bunch of dependencies, that's quite a useful one. Any tags you want to make sure you're testing or not testing. So if you've got integration tests, you probably don't want to run this as part of a build, especially if they're going to talk infrastructure that isn't available. Where do we want the code coverage output file to go, and what do we want it to be called? What files should we be looking at for doing code coverage? We just put it in a folder and then figure everything out from under that. And then a script block. So the script block one is because you might have things that need to run in the context of the overall task rather than within your tests. So this was requested a little while ago by someone who wanted to do some stuff with Citrix, and you have to add the snap-ins outside of the tests and then run the tests, otherwise it just doesn't work properly for various reasons. So we've got some stuff here for running 32-bit. We do some stuff to get our additional module paths in. This is the code we'll be looking at in a minute, which is checking what version of Pester is currently installed. And basically, if you've got PowerShell get and you can install module without skip publisher check, which actually we can drop now because Pester is being signed. We do some stuff to see, does the version of Pester you have match the latest version available? If not, download the latest version. So we're going to have a look at that very soon. And if not, then just use 4.3.1 that we ship with the extension. I should probably increment that soon once 4.5 is officially out, so that we're using a slightly more up-to-date version. Then we build a nice little hash table of what we need to pass to invoke Pester. We figure out where we're running our tests from. There are times when you want to pass in different parameters to your different tests, and in those cases Pester has some proper syntax for what path you want to target, like what parameters you want to pass into that. So we just have this function to convert that string into a proper hash table. That just uses the AST. It's a nice simple thing. We hack around the tags that have been passed in because they have to be comment delimited, but the task picks them up as a single string, so we just kind of split that up, do a little bit of replacement. Okay, Kevin, if it's a bit hot here, let's see if I can increase the sound. Let's see if that does anything. I noticed that was a bit low. Hi, Bob. Is that better? It's a new mic, so it's having a bit of a play around with what levels are acceptable and stuff like that. Right, excellent. Okay, so yes, as I was saying, we split the tags up because otherwise they're just going to come through as a big long string, and Pester doesn't like that. It needs them as an array. We do some replacement on quotes and stuff because who knows what sort of random nonsense people are passing into us. Code coverage, we figure out if we're in Pester version higher than version 4.04 when code coverage first appeared. And then if we're not, we just ignore it and say, sorry, can't do that. But if we are, then find all of the files that we could possibly include as tests to do code coverage, PS1s, PSM1s, but not test files, because generally you don't want to be testing code coverage against your test files, unless you're also writing tests to test your tests. But that's, again, at that point you probably don't, you don't really care about code coverage at that point. Or unlikely to care about code coverage. So we basically just find all the files, dump them into that parameter, run the script block that we've been passed. I'm not a huge fan of the script block idea. I know why it's needed, and it's useful that it's there for some cases, but just arbitrarily running a script block on a build agent just feels wrong. But that's just how it is, unfortunately. There's not much we can do other than hope people know better than to just pass it any old nonsense and let it run on their build boxes. And then, we just invoke Pester with our splat, and then error out if any tests fail, write an error, so then the build will fail. So not a particularly complicated script, but just trying to handle a whole bunch of different parameters that people can pass in. So looking at our problem area, if we go back to our issue, it's because we're getting pre-release issue flags. Now, I don't think we should be seeing that at all. So if I'm here and I do find module Pester, by default, this shouldn't find pre-release versions at all. Once it goes off to question for things. So that this should show 4.4.4. So the only thing I can think is somehow either all versions is being passed or allow pre-releases being passed to it. And again, we don't really want either of those getting into there because we end up with like a whole load of stuff. So all versions doesn't look like it's a problem, but allow pre-release is a problem. So first things first, let's get ourselves on a branch. Fix. So there's not really a good way to test this. So we've got a whole bunch of tests in here already, which do some checking of the various stuff. And where did I have it? Sure, we've got some tests. Testing what version's loaded. Thought I had some tests for which version of Pester we're installing. Apparently I don't. So it's still a little bit of a problem to try to test this because I'm going to have to mock this, and at that point it doesn't really matter what I pass it. It's not something I can easily test correctly or as well as I'd like. We could put this into our integration tests because we've got a whole bunch of those. Which might be an option. but I'd have to have a look at that and figure out. Well, remember how we're currently doing integration tests and what the best way to do that would be to test this bit. But for now, we're just going to do a nice simple allow pre-release because it's a flag, and we'll say false. So never ever return us pre-releases. The only problem becomes what happens if, so in theory, we shouldn't ever see pre-release versions now, and even if people have default parameters set, that shouldn't bring anything up because we're explicitly setting it as a parameter. Let's try and remember the syntax for default parameters. PS default parameter values. Because I don't use this very often, it would be useful to double check how. Okay, that's how we do it. Allow. So I can't imagine why anyone would set this as a default parameter, but you know, people do all sorts of weird things with PowerShell. So if we do find module with nothing specified, let's do that. Yeah, so that works fine, but if I then do allow pre-release, that should return 4.4.4. Yeah, excellent. So this is a nice and simple fix. Let's update the README first because I always forget to do that, and Richard tells me off. So what are we up to? 8.9.x. Fix find module so it doesn't attempt to find pre-release versions. That issue is 412. We might want to go through at some point and update all of these links to the new repo name because it was renamed once we had the rename of Azure pipelines, but that's not an important job at the moment. Add parameter name. Simple commit message, git push. That's definitely not the branch I want to push to. Hopefully this will fail. It probably won't. So I should clean up my branches a little bit more. There we go. Right. So if I jump back over to here, let's create a pull request, and then we can show off our release pipeline that we have in place for this. My module was sometimes finding pre-release versions of Pester, which this was causing it to fail as else on there. So let's double check what is being created is correct. I've added my readme entry and I've just added a parameter. So create the pull request. Yeah, I'll say me. Add some labels. Pester. So here we have our release pipeline. Oh, that looks awful. Let's jump to my other browser for that. So we have quite a few builds for the various extensions we manage. Pester extension. And they do some simple things. We update the if you put the issue name, issue number in the title, it'll auto close it, but I'm not in any rush to do that right now. I'm quite happy waiting for this whole thing to run through. So first thing we do is update the task.json file with our latest version number to make sure when we publish it, it's a newer version than the previous one. Then we test our task using our own task because we've got a whole bunch of tests, so we might as well run them. And then publish the results, create a private and public versions of the packages because we want to be able to test them internally before we publish them and potentially push out bugs and other breaking changes. So quite a quick build. I haven't brought in anything as far as my tests are concerned because let's go into the finishes. 51 tests I've passed, which is a nice, good sign. We just need to wait for this to produce our various packages. Takes a little while sometimes because it's got to download the various applications that does this. And then we can watch it go through our release pipeline, or the release part of this pipeline, which again takes a little while because it's got a number of interesting steps. So build's done. We go to releases. So so our release has a couple of different stages. So first up we have our publishing privately. So that publishes the extension to the gallery, marked as private and only available to Azure DevOps instances that we've shared it with. Then it runs two sets of tests. These ones it runs just on a hosted agent within the release. So it's running the same tests both ways, but it wants to. We want to run it in the context of a release and in the context of a build. So that's what this one's doing, the release stuff. And then we have our build test, which spins up a VM we have in Azure in Dev Test Labs, and then triggers a build to run on that release, on that build agent. So if I go over to our validation builds, and it's this one in fact, that'll kick off in a few minutes. Yeah, so I've expanded this a lot so that the build runs on multiple platforms within the scope of a build, just to be sure things actually download correctly and run correctly. The Mac and Linux ones are currently disabled because we can't run PowerShell on those yet, or can't run PowerShell custom tasks on those yet. You can run normal PowerShell scripts on them, no problem, but kind of defeats the point of having a custom task if we have to have a PowerShell script as well. I shouldn't say hosted agent, but okay. It's an interesting thing. Yeah. So we run basically the same process of run a bunch of Pester tests, run a bunch of Pester tests with a specific script block. So we have some parameters that are accepted in. So this is the format Pester expects. And then we run the test as 32-bit. Again, just making sure that the major ways you can run the task are covered by this. Publish the results. Not quite sure why we're publishing the artifacts, because we don't really need to, but that is what it is. If we go back to here and right here, oh, interesting. That's an interesting problem. Huh. Let's dig into why this isn't working. Let's try that. Do I have to update the release stage? No. Okay, so to cover the last part of it, we then publish the public version of the task. Once all of our other testing has succeeded, if it's succeeded, send a tweet from either myself or Richard, depending on whoever created the release, and then we update our build so that we never release the same version again. So this will be 8.9, the next one will be 8.10 automatically. I don't have to worry about remembering to update that or anything else. It just makes life a lot simpler to have this happening automatically for us. So let's quickly change this release. So we do it here. Curious why that broke. There we go. So the other thing we have in place on these releases, which we'll see in a minute, we'll see once this finally kicks in, is we've got some release gates in place, which are a way of automatically approving or, or disapproving, I guess, denying the artifacts from moving to a new stage unless the conditions are met. So in our case, we've got a approval gate on leaving this environment, which says, I think I can click it here actually. Make sure, basically it's querying the marketplace to say, is my extension available at the version I expect it to be available? Because we had some interesting problems where we'd publish to the marketplace, but it wouldn't be available straight away. We have to wait a minute or two, and that means that when you start running your later environments that test things, they're getting the old version of the extension, and it's not what you expect. You're getting different results. They might be failing randomly or succeeding when they shouldn't be. So we have a deployment gate in place to just poll the marketplace every 5 minutes to say, is this version of the extension available? And if yes, fine, we'll continue. If no, then just wait a bit, wait 5 more minutes, try again. I've never seen it take more than 5 to 10 minutes, and that's mostly on our versioning extensions, which we have, I think, 12 or 13 different tasks in there. So some of them might report false on the first check, and then, or on the second check, and we have to wait a little bit longer for it to carry over. So there we go. You can see that we checked the marketplace and it said, yep, you've got the version that you expect. You want 8.9.1, that's what you have available. So we then have to, we're expecting a minimum of 2 successes. So it's a case of, is it available right now, and is it still available in a few minutes time, just in case we got like a false positive, or in the case of like our versioning one where we've got 12 different possible tasks, we want to make sure all of them are available. The only problem is with deployment gates there's a limit of 10. So in that one with 12 tasks in, we've only got 10, and we're fine with that. That's just how it's set up. Now we just wait. So while I'm waiting, let's show some of the other releases off. So this one's quite easy because it's just one type of task that only runs on Windows. Whereas if we look at versioning one, is pretty similar as well, I believe. Oh, we run on multiple platforms here. So yeah, in this case we run on Windows, Linux and Mac. Again, all of them have to pass before we move on. Or in theory all of them have to pass before we move on. Apparently, not necessarily the case. The release notes one is very similar in that we want to run on all 3 platforms to make sure everything passes. This is a little more difficult to test though, because the way the release notes extension works is it picks it up based on changes to code and work items. So we have a whole bunch of stuff that creates new check-ins on the code and makes new work items, so that when we generate the release notes, we're actually getting release notes out of it. So we've got a little, apparently it sends an email to Richard to say, here's your example release notes once this has all succeeded. But yeah, we have some builds that trigger that generate those release notes and generate the commits and the work items that we need for actually testing that we're getting release notes out of it. So this is still making sure that everything's passing successfully and that it's actually available in the gallery. It's quite nice when you've got this sort of smooth release pipeline where you just go make a pull request and then come back in 20 minutes, half an hour, make sure all of the builds and releases have passed successfully. So while that's doing that, I might update these. So the problem with updating all of these release notes is that will then make another release, which I really don't particularly want to do for updating all of this. So what I could do is I could make the change and just never release publicly because we don't care, and then the next time I do a feature change or a bug fix or whatever, I can handle it there. I can do the public release then and all my links update, but at the same time all these links will work perfectly fine because GitHub automatically redirects them. So yeah, I think I'll live without updating the README. So let's have a look. 2 more minutes. Looking at the same thing twice. So what else do we have on here? So all of these extensions are on GitHub and publicly accessible. So if you ever use Azure DevOps and want to use any of these or see what they do or make pull requests or anything, we've got them all on here. They're all under Richard's name, so just search Marketplace for Fennel and you'll find a bunch of them. I should really get around to publishing some more of mine that I've got. Pull request. There we go. So now it's triggered both of our releases, or the next stages of our release. Starting up our VM, going to run our tests using the latest version of our extension, so we don't need to worry about any weird issues with that. We did run into some for a little while where I was doing some testing. I'm like, well, it's just not downloading the right version of the extension. And yeah, that's one of the reasons we put in that release gate to wait for 5-10 minutes, basically, to make sure things actually work. So otherwise, can I go back far enough? No. So I don't think these tests take particularly long. Again, our validation builds are pretty simple, and the code for them is pretty basic. Pester test validation. So it's literally just we've got a simple add numbers function, which everyone does as their first kind of Pester stuff. We haven't bothered updating these, as you can see, to version 4 syntax, so we're still using the legacy naming because, again, it doesn't really matter, it still works. If Pester ever removes that, then we'll have to rev this, but that's not too much of a problem. And then a simple couple of tests, because why not have some more? I think we run all of the tests in here, so there might be more, but I don't think they are. No. There we go. So all of our tests succeeded on this stage, and we should be able to go to our build and see our validation build is triggered, or it will do as soon as that build box starts up. There we go. All 7 of our tests passed. There might be some scope to expand on that integration test suite and the validation tests and stuff, but I'm not quite sure yet what I want to test with it. The allow pre-release stuff would be probably quite a good idea. Yeah, other than that, I'm not sure yet. To figure that out. Yep, so this is starting up our lab VM. Takes a couple of minutes to start a new VM up, or start the VM up itself. It's automatically set to shut down at 7 o'clock-ish, I think, so we don't need to worry about this it's incurring lots of costs on any subscriptions. Hoped it'd be a little bit faster than this starting a VM up, but I'm guessing it just needs to keep polling it to figure out if it's actually started. It's passed. Now I could just hit deploy here if I wanted to, but that kind of defeats the point in having all of this pipeline stuff. So it's nice to make sure everything's going to pass. And we have one warning over here. What's that? It's probably worth looking at, but I think that's built into the tasks. That's not something we can do anything with. if there's any little fix that I can make that. There's no point downloading artifacts in this stage or in the other stage, so I might quickly modify this release a bit more. Just tidy things up a bit. What's this one doing? It doesn't need to download that, so let's not. And yeah, that doesn't need to download any artifacts. It's just starting up build agent. What was that? So although these aren't really adding any time to how long the release takes, it still, saves me a couple of seconds on each one, which is minuscule, but might as well make it to. And it means we're not downloading things to build agents we don't necessarily control. So like these are using the hosted agents, and I've got no control over those. I don't want bits of my code downloading on them, even if it's just validation code. Wow. Usually it doesn't take this long to start the VM up. At least I don't think it usually takes this long to start the VM up. Let's have a look. 8.8.4. Yeah, so the last time I ran this release it took 2 minutes. But because it was 8.8.4, I imagine that was probably ran on the same day as some of these other releases. Let's have a look at this one. That took 2 minutes. Helpful. This really shouldn't take 8 minutes to start the VM. Unless it's patching the VM or something possibly, but I wouldn't expect that to impact how long it takes to mark it as started or running. We do have some I think we've got a retry count on here. Do we? Apparently not. Interesting. I thought we had like a kind of a retry count saying how many times we should attempt to start the VM or how long we should wait, but apparently not. So this project is also a public project, so it's linked on the GitHub page. So all of these links will take you directly to that released this extension. Although I think those links could probably be updated to mark them as the new dev.azure.com links. But I don't think either myself or Richard really care. Do we have a dashboard for this? Oh, we do. Lots of big green dashboards, which is nice. it's still starting. I think I'm going to give this another minute and a half or so and then cancel it and see if I can start it again, or if I can skip this stage or this step. Unfortunately, I don't have access to that subscription, so I can't see what's going on with that VM. I don't think I have access to that subscription. Let's find out. Not on that account. So just control this over here. And that two-factor auth gets me. I might actually have access to this subscription, which will be useful. Dev test labs, that's what I'm looking for. Likely, and so it looks like I found the agent, or the VM it is, but it doesn't seem to be wanting to load any information. Interesting. So portal is marking it as failed. Which is a bit interesting. And has no information about the VM. Let's jump into that resource group. Yeah. So in the portal it's showing as updating, which suggests it's updating the agent or something else that's stopping it from being marked as ready. So I kind of just have to wait and see. Yeah, so this might take a little while if it's updating the agent on the VM or doing Windows updates or something like that. So yeah, that's basically the process that we go through for deploying these. I'm going to say screw it and just deploy it. Because why not? Might as well live dangerously. I'm pretty sure it'll work. But I just want to run through. And yeah, we have approvals in place to make sure before we do go to production, we have to manually say yes, it's actually ready. I should probably add myself to that list, but it's just as easy overriding Richard, so I get less emails and he gets more. So this should be a reasonably quick deployment, and it'll be published to the STS, published to the Azure DevOps Marketplace, and then there'll be a tweet out by me saying just publish the latest version. I think we may have the version number in there, and then we'll see that we've updated the version number on our build. So if I go to here, quick look about this. So our build, we can see we're on 8.9, and that's what we're up to, because as you can see 8.9.1. Gotta make sure you get plenty of emails, Richard. Gotta keep you busy somehow. Because this step is NPM based, we have to download half of the internet to run it. Yeah, we're only using a few NPM packages, so we only need half the internet. We don't need anything like is odd and is even to make sure numbers are actually odd or even, because NPM apparently needs packages for that. These publish steps take a little while sometimes. Only 8,000 do hello world. That's not too bad. I'm sure Angular could probably beat that instead of React. There we go. Yeah. Could take a little time doing that. Interesting. tweeted out as Richard. Oh well. So we'll see if I refresh this build, we'll have updated to 8.10. Yep, so our minor version is now 10, so we can any new versions I do will go out as that, and it will continue incrementing onwards automatically. So I should now be a tweet out as Richard saying everything's good, and I can merge this PR. So I used to do the PR, make sure it builds, make sure it passes all of our tests, then merge it, and then do the whole process again to do the actual public release. But there's no real benefit to doing that, and I know Richard generally releases off the PR, so I've just kind of got used to doing that as well, because it's nice and easy. It means not having to run through that whole process again. So PR's merged, I can delete that branch, because I don't care about it. And update this release, update this issue. Released 8.8.1 should fix this by forcing up false. So hopefully that person won't be having that problem anymore, and if they are, I'll have to dig into it even further and figure out what could possibly be going wrong. I suspect it's an environmental problem if that doesn't fix it, because I can't see anything else in our code that could possibly be doing that. So let's just update my local repo, make sure I'm nice and up to date. So yeah, it was this check here that was hitting the exception, because we're trying to do comparison of an actual version item and a non-version. So yeah, I can't see anything else in our code that could possibly be triggering that, and before this we were definitely not specifically looking for pre-release versions, shouldn't have ever found pre-release versions, but maybe we were for whatever random environmental issue they have. So hopefully that fixes their problem for them. And I need to figure out what's going on with our... No, so the agent started up and it's now triggered all of our builds. So if I go over to builds, or it's waiting for our agent to start up. That's an interesting one. Is it that stage that runs on that agent? Yes. Okay, that makes more sense. And we have to update our validation builds to actually use that agent as well, rather than just being triggered by that agent for at least one of the phases. I imagine that box is still going through some Windows updates, so that's why it hasn't finished starting up the agent. I don't particularly want to dive into debugging that at the moment. Let's quickly update this release then, on this build, to run on that agent as well. There's no easy way to copy these, unfortunately. So let's add an agent job, private agent we want this to run on there. It doesn't rely on anything else, so should be able to drag and drop these down here. Slowly move them down the screen because it doesn't apparently want to scroll when I scroll. So that now we're running on basically every type of agent we can other than containers. Maybe one or two others. Let's see. So we're running the main different types of hosted agent. We should be running on the Ubuntu one, I think, instead of the Linux one. And that should and a private agent, so that should give us all of the main, well, all of the different possible ways to run our build with the different ways to run our task. Don't think there's anything else in here I want to do. I could add some tests that have tags in and duplicate these steps, but that feels a bit too heavyweight to have that many duplicate copies of a single step. 3's plenty, I think. And I know I've got plenty of builds that make use of this task that uses tags and code coverage and stuff. So if I really want to double check it, it definitely works. I can just trigger some of those builds. Oh, now it's triggering a release build. So the output from that that step isn't the prettiest. As you can see, it's clearly just getting a whole bunch of extra characters and stuff through that can't parse correctly. Just kind of sort of read what's happened, what it's doing. So there we go. The Linux and Mac ones haven't done anything because, yeah. Excellent, so I've moved it off the right one. And then our steps are running. Of course, if it fails at this point, I then need to figure out why and go and release an 8.10, but since I've changed basically nothing other than something that should have been working in the first place, I can't imagine it's going to fail, especially if it's gone through all of our other tests successfully. And this is a nice benefit of Azure DevOps, is that we can have potentially 5 different builds running in parallel. I should rename that so it matches. Ooh, that's an interesting problem. So this step can't trigger because the release is using that agent to trigger this build and wait. So I might have to move these steps out of, well, I will have to move these steps out of the build and put them in the release to run on that agent, because otherwise it's just going to get stuck there doing nothing. As that waits for the release to finish and the release waits for this to finish. Let's cancel that. That's an interesting problem. Yeah, that's going to fail, so let's cancel that as well. We've released it, so it's not a huge issue. This is just tidying up the process a bit. So trigger that build. Really love YAML releases, so make this a bit easier. Pester. Still another one out there. So I actually will have to download some artifacts with this. Those ones. We need to make sure we're looking in the right folder. Yeah, I know that's why we kind of set this up. And I'd just completely forgotten that trying to run it on the same agent that had queued up that release just wasn't going to work. So that should work fine for path, I think. No, it won't. It's called something different. Test on. This should be a script block or a hash table. I want that. Same thing again, but with 32-bit running. I don't particularly care about the output of these, other than that they do pass, so I'm not going to bother picking up the different XML files. Excellent. Nice UI there. So yeah, that makes things a bit more sensible than my infinite deadlocks and loops. Save that release. Yeah, it's a nice end-to-end pipeline for how we handle these extensions. I don't think there's a whole lot more to do with this Pester extension other than bug fixes as they come up and incrementing the new versions of Pester as it comes out. So yeah, 4.5 when that's officially released, probably in, I imagine, a couple of weeks. Beta 2 just went out earlier today. I'll probably increment the version of Pester that ships with it to that version. And I'll drop this skip publisher check stuff because it shouldn't be needed anymore since it should be signed now. That'll make it a little bit nicer. And I would like to properly test some of this stuff, but unfortunately I can't, because you can't mock get command, I think it is, or get module. There's one of them you can't mock because of some internals, the way Pester handles it. There's a way to fix it, but I don't think that's been done yet, and I haven't had a chance to look at exactly how to fix it and or what the recommended way to fix it is for Pester and make the change. So I think that's me done for tonight. I might do some more tomorrow when I go back to doing stuff on the GIA DSC stuff I've been doing. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope it's been helpful or interesting to people for how we do these pipelines, how I handle the development of these, or at least of the Pester extension, since that's the primary one of these I manage. Maintain. Yeah, thanks a lot.